Good evening. Today is Monday, September 12, 2022, and this is the 115th episode of New Paradigms. I'm your host, Sargis Sangari. Before we begin our podcast tonight, I do want to take a few minutes to reflect back on the 21st anniversary of 9/11 attacks and the 8th anniversary of the establishment of my company, the Near East Center for Strategic Engagement. It is very much my hope that as you reflected on the 9/11 attacks yesterday, that you were able to also at the same time keep in mind that the testimonies about those who died and perished on 9/11, 2001 should really spur us as Americans on reflection and also resolution to preserve our institutions and, more importantly, the values that courageous men and women have lived, served, and at times died for to protect. NECSC was founded by me on September 11, 2014 in commemoration of the Americans who were murdered in the terrorist attacks of 9/11 and in recognition of the first responders who still continue to suffer and also die from the health effects that are arising from those attacks still. We bring together people from different places and backgrounds who dedicate themselves to keeping what I call the flame of liberty alive, and also our shared cultural values of freedom and mutual respect through partnership and, more importantly, teamwork. We do this in order to be able to defy those individuals and their accomplices who really conspired together to make the 9/11 attacks take place. And more importantly, whose violent adherents still today long for the enslavement of mankind. To that end, my guest today is Frank R. DiFranco. Frank is a criminal defense attorney, a good friend, and also the lead for DiFranco Associates. He was the GOP nominee for the 12th Subcircuit Judge of the Cook County Judicial Circuit Court in Illinois in 2020. Frank graduated from Loyola University in 1984 and also the Chicago Kent Law School, prestigious Chicago Kent Law in 87. He's here today to discuss the 2020 Illinois Local Election Discrepancies and the future of a free and fair election in the state of Illinois and other states. Before we begin bringing him in, there's a video interview that was conducted of Frank after the 2020 elections, and I'm going to start off with that first, and then we'll have a discussion with Frank on where we are today.
Claims of election fraud, but they're not coming from the White House.
Now, one man who ran for judge in Cook County claims thousands of ballots mysteriously materialized after the November 7th deadline to count them, and it cost him the race. Let's go live now to CBS 2 political investigator Dana Kozlov. Dana, he says the county clerk's own website indicated there were no ballots left to count, and he was the winner until he wasn't.
Yeah, that's right, Brad and Marie. Frank DiFranco, who ran as a Republican for Cook County Judge, says that his campaign got daily vote and ballot totals from the Cook County Clerk's Office and the Board of Elections of the county. But he says that red flags went up, way up, when the numbers didn't add up.
It doesn't make sense.
Attorney Frank DiFranco says something smells in the county of Cook. He ran for judge of the 12th Subcircuit. He says on November 16th, the day before the vote counting deadline, he was winning the race. According to Cook County Clerk Karen Yarbrough's website, he was also winning on the 17th, deadline day. Then somehow, the day after no more votes should have been counted, the race flipped and DiFranco lost by 502 votes.
Obviously, something's wrong. Obviously, there is some type of fraud involved.
DiFranco also points to the ballot status page on the Cook County Clerk's website to back up his incriminating allegations. As of November 14th, the website states the number of ballots left to be counted was 0. Ina Bokian backs that up.
We had nothing left to count.
She was an election judge counting ballots at this Cicero site.
Half of us went home on the 13th because we were told that there were no votes left to count.
DiFranco says his campaign also had a poll watcher in Cicero who claims the same.
What we need to know is you added these votes on November 18th. Where did they come from?
DiFranco and his lawyer even went to court asking for injunctive relief to, among other things, delay the race's certification. The judge denied the motion, telling DiFranco to contest the election through normal channels. Hours later, the Cook County Board of Elections certified the results with the state, a spokesperson saying no ballots received after November 17th were counted. DiFranco says numbers from the clerk's office actually raise questions about, he says, almost 18,000 ballots that seem to materialize after November 17th. So what are his options now? He says he plans to appeal the judge's ruling today in hopes of preserving those specific ballots in question so his campaign can take a look at them. And he is weighing his options for a recount. Live in the loop outside the Cook County building, Dana Kozlov, CBS 2 News. Brad?
Certainly seems fishy. Let's stay on top of it. Thank you, Dana.
Frank, it's good to have you here, buddy. Much appreciated for the time. I know we were having some difficulties trying to get you here before, but with the 2022 elections coming here, I thought it was important for our audiences to know that these issues at the local level have to be resolved. It's not just at the national level. And it's good to have you here, and I wanted to hear about where we are today.
Well, thanks. I'm really happy to be here. Well, what happened after that was we filed for a discovery recount where we're allowed to count 25% of the precincts. Unfortunately, when we went to that discovery recount, they didn't allow us to count any ballots. What they did was they showed us scans of ballots. We learned later, or we figured out, it was pretty obvious. The reason they do scans of ballots and not actual ballots is because they can rescan the same ballot 10, 20, 50, 100 times, and you would never know it because you're just sitting in front of a computer and a ballot comes by and it's just scanned in, which was interesting, though, because there was in one precinct over 100 ballots that in a presidential election, the only vote on the ballot was for Patricia Fallon. Right away, red flags go up because that's just unheard of in a presidential election that many ballots out of one precinct would only vote for one election. But of course, when you learn about ballot stuffing, they don't want to try to affect other elections. So what they do is they only affect the election that they want to affect. And therefore, that's one method of only affecting my race and not other races. So what happens next is we also found that they were missing over 2,000 plus vote by mail envelopes. Well, we knew from the beginning that there were over 18,500 more vote by mail ballots that were counted than existed pursuant to the court's records, the clerk's records. Yeah, that's right. They added 18,500 more vote by mail ballots than existed pursuant to the clerk's records. So what do? We find out that they're missing thousands of vote by mail envelopes. So then again, that proves our theory that what they're doing is they're rescanning the same votes. So we file a lawsuit with the court. We ask for discovery. Obviously, in any civil case, you're entitled to discovery. We received none. They wouldn't allow us to review ballots. They wouldn't allow us to review the vote by mail envelopes. No records, nothing. What we did, though, they filed a motion to dismiss our lawsuit. And they said, although they were missing all these vote by mail envelopes in the discovery recount, guess what, Judge? We found them now, they claim. So what they did was they filed a motion to dismiss and they attached an electronic copy of 60,000 plus vote by mail envelopes. Now, what was interesting was that 70% of the vote by mail envelopes were redacted. In other words, they blacked out the names, the addresses, and the information on 70% of the vote by mail envelopes. Why only 70%? Why not 100%? Well, what we found out through my lawyers was that they didn't properly even redact the 70%, which, by the way, should have never been redacted because under the law, election materials are all supposed to be public. They should have never been concealed in the first place. However, and anything that's placed in the mail, you have no expectation of privacy. And that's what it is. It's the outside envelope of something that's placed in the mail. Anyway, so what happens is our lawyers, they go through and catalog each and every vote by mail ballot envelope, and there was over 100,000. But there were 60,000 that was tendered to us in discovery. And out of those 60,000, we found that over 7,500 were deficient, because the reason they were redacting them is they were hiding the deficiencies. So you would have a vote by mail envelope that wasn't signed. So what they did was they put a big solid black mark over it so you couldn't see that it was unsigned. They had the residency requirements. They blacked it out because it was deficient. What they did was they hid the deficiencies in the vote by mail envelopes. So what we did, because that's the first discovery we actually ever had, was their motion to dismiss and tendering us these vote by mail envelopes. So what we did was we filed a motion to amend our complaint. And now we have a complaint that says, hey, these vote by mail envelopes are deficient. These votes cannot be counted. So we took the number of deficient vote by mail envelopes and we subtract the votes proportionately to me and my opponent. And now I win by thousands of votes. But what happens? Instead, what happens is the judge says, oh, you were able to see those redacted? You were able to see the deficiencies? Well, that's improper. You should have brought that to my attention, and I'm not going to let you amend your complaint because you have unclean hands. Now, unclean hands, any lawyer will tell you, is in civil court and equity court. However, it goes to the parties, not the lawyers. So the judge tried to make this argument to protect that party of his, and that argument was that we had unclean hands, so he's not going to allow us to amend our petition. He didn't say you're wrong. He knew we were right. He knew if he allowed us to amend our petition, we would win. It would be over. But he saved the day for him, because what they argued that latches, oh, it's too old now. We can't defend that because too much time has gone by, which of course is ridiculous. It's a ridiculous argument. But that's all they had, because they don't have a good argument. But the judge came and saved the day for them, and he just says, okay, I'm not going to allow you to amend your complaint. You have unclean hands. And I'll tell you what else they did. They made ARDC complaints against my lawyers saying that we breached some ethical duty or standard, which is insane, because what he should have said was that the other side hid the deficiencies in the ballot. When you redact a blank signature, what are you redacting it for? You're redacting it to hide the fact it's deficient. So that's what the judge did. So he just cut our legs off, and said, okay, I'm not going to allow you to amend. I'm going to dismiss your complaint, which is even better, because the clerk admitted that although he certified that all these 60,000+ vote by mail envelopes were valid and reviewed, he never reviewed them or did anything. But that's what he swore to. So what happens now? So now we file a notice of appeal, and we're going to go to the appellate court and hopefully get the understanding and the fairness that we deserve in having these issues litigated. Hopefully, one day we'll be able to get discovery. They'll be able to show us the actual real ballots, not the ones that they rescanned in over and over again, because that's what they were afraid of. They were afraid of if we had a real recount and they took the ballots, which is normally what they do in a recount. You take a stack of ballots, you put them on a table, you put them in a machine. They come through the machine, you put them on the other table, and then you see what the count is. They never would do that. They didn't do it. They didn't allow us to do it. What they did, of course, is show you scans. So they already hid the fraud by rescanning it, and then they show us a scan. If you're looking at ballots of in excess of 100,000, one at a time at a scan, there's no way you're going to be able to tell that they rescan the same ballot. Only, like I said before, when you find a number like 100 in one precinct that is all just voted for my opponent.
Frank, real quick on this, and I want to go back and you could give us a little bit of an insight as to who this judge was or who he is still, who's probably sitting on bench making cases about other issues. When you, I don't know if most Americans know, but discovery is huge in a court case because that gives both sides an opportunity to equal out the entire process to where you can say, I want to see these items. Now, when it comes to how it works in the case of that you have filed, I mean, I don't understand how it's possible for them not to allow discovery and a judge just allows that to go through. Is there someone else that can come in and basically say, even without, with regardless of what the judge says, that this is a violation? Or are they all part of the same system, same cloth? Which is the reason they're probably not wanting to show how bad the system is, because then that means that they got to their position using the same bad system to begin with.
Well, what we did in light of that, because we foresaw this type of issue, we filed a substitution of judges against this judge and against Cook County. We knew that we really could not get a fair trial in Cook County when you have a full circuit judge sitting and it's against that full circuit judge, and now you have an associate judge ruling on it from the same county. He literally, his chambers was right down the hall. He actually made a comment during one of the hearings, oh, I see her, I wave hi to her, but I can be fair. See, the crazy part is an associate judge is not an elected judge in Cook County. The associate judge is elected by the full circuit judges. So he is actually ruling on a case where the full circuit judge votes to keep him on the bench. So it's obviously a conflict. It's so obvious to be a conflict. It's beyond comprehension how the judge says he could be fair. Well, he knew he wasn't going to be fair, or he couldn't be fair, because just as evidence is by how he rules on the case, how he doesn't allow. Find me one case where you have a civil case and they don't allow to amend. What is the basis for not amending? His theory of unclean hands? Of course, it's ridiculous. But right there, there's a conflict that we brought up and a conflict that he denied, and he said he could be fair. So he prevented us from having the proper discovery and to properly amend so we could properly litigate. So that's why we also filed a federal case, because we believe the federal court will be much more fair. It'll be detached, and it's not going to be beholden to anyone, where you have the situation where I'm ruling against a brother judge. When you find out the standards in Cook County, the majority of the cases where a judge is a victim of a case, they move the case out of Cook County. Where a spouse of a judge is a victim or whatever, they move the case out of Cook County. Here you have a judge actually being a party to the litigation, and the associate judge says he could be fair. Well,
obviously, if he was fair, then the outcome would be different. When you have these type of judges that have been placed into the system by, as we say, corrupt leaders, some of which Madigan was indicted, was this judge anyway tied to Madigan at all?
I don't specifically know, but he's okay. The Democratic Party. That's where the majority of the judges came from, was a Democratic Party. Back then, he literally had a list that Madigan would send out to all the full circuit judge, telling them what judges he wanted them to vote for. And
so this would be, but in his case, he would have been appointed. So somebody would have had to bless off on the appointment. And at that time, Madigan was in charge. If he was appointed during the time of Madigan, Madigan would have had to at least say that this individual needs to be appointed to that position, if I'm not mistaken.
He was an associate judge, and the associate judges are voted on by the full circuit judges.
Okay.
But to become on the ballot, to be an associate judge, there's a committee, and that committee lists the people that they can vote for. So you're limited, the full circuits are limited to vote for the people that the committee puts out to be on the ballot. And Madigan, which I was told and learned, that he literally had his own list that he would send to the committee or to people to put on that list.
Okay, and that's what I was trying to get at. I think I unfortunately went around it the wrong way in this case. Okay,
Well, what I think
now go ahead.
I hate to interrupt you, but what we had talked about before was that Fallon, my opponent, was appointed. What happened was she didn't, for the last 3 years, she worked in human resources for the recorder of deeds. She wasn't even working as a lawyer. And out of nowhere, she gets appointed to the open 12 subcircuit spot that Judge Hanlon resigned from before her term was out. So she moves out of Chicago into the suburbs to be in the 12 subcircuit, and she becomes appointed. Now, the crazy part is anyone that does any research on Madigan, they'll find out that Madigan had his control by controlling jobs. And there's actually an excellent thing on YouTube from Illinois Policy about how they control the jobs because now they control the human resources of every department. And those human resources are the ones that do the hiring. So just go think about it. So what happens? She's not working as a lawyer for over 3 years. She's got hardly no trial experience, 2 trials. She's not endorsed in the Tribune in the primary. Howard Weiss was, which is an experienced trial litigator. She's not endorsed against me in the Tribune because she has no trial experience. She hasn't even worked as a lawyer for 3 years, and they pick her to appoint her to be judge. Why? Why would they pick her? I mean, think about it. Why would they pick someone that's working at the Human Resources Department, head of Human Resources for Recorder of Deeds? They don't have this courtroom full of lawyers that are litigators and that are experienced lawyers. They're going to say, oh, yeah, maybe we should go get that young lady that works in Human Resources Department and appoint her judge. Right off the bat, you could see the trail. You could see what's happened.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's even a spin in the face of those Democratic lawyers that have much more experience, and they don't even get picked because the person who's picking him is an individual sitting in, Springfield recently got indicted, and it is what it is. But from this process now, given the fact that these are the characters that you have to deal with in Cook County, what happens at the state level? Did you guys go to this Illinois Supreme Court and debate this issue, or are you still waiting for the appeals process of the decision that was made? And if so, what is delaying the process?
Right. So what happens is now is we have created a record and we filed our notice of appeal and we're going to the appellate court. And hopefully we'll get relief in the appellate court. If we don't, then we'll be forced to go to the Illinois Supreme Court.
The people in the appellate court, though, aren't they still, if we're talking about Cook County and what has happened and with Madigan being here so long, are those individuals anyway tied to the current judge who made that decision as to not allowing you to be able to basically show everything that was discovered during discovery that could have probably flipped the entire case?
No, those judges are above his position. His position is one that's dependent upon the full circuit judges to reelect him, to retain him. So the appellate court judges are independent. There's nobody, the public will vote for them to retain them. So no, they're much more independent. You're going to get a much more fair forum in the appellate court than you would ever in a state court with an associate judge.
Well, what is it that has gotten you to have to be now, we're almost coming into the midterms in 2022, to where it still hasn't made it to the appellate court to be seen? Tell us a little bit about the timeline that others have to deal with if they have to go through this case.
Well, that's the big problem, is what they do is they try to delay and lengthen it out. So it costs you a lot of money and a lot of time, and that's their goal, to make it last as long and cost the most money as you can. What's interesting is that the lawyer for the clerk was Michael Casper. Guess who he represented? Michael Madigan. What a shock. What a surprise. So now the county is paying for Michael Casper to litigate against me, not Fallon, not my opponent, him, because the clerk's office somehow has a vested interest. Of course, you would think the vested interest would be truth and justice and to find out what happened, to try to find out what the trier of fact, the information you would need. But no, just the opposite. It's Chicago politics, right? What do you go back to? You go back to Michael Casper probably billing a fortune to the clerk's office for this case where they really shouldn't even have had a horse in the race. What they should have been doing was independent and giving us the discovery and making this information available. But why wouldn't they? Why would they not?
Well, they've been embarrassed, and they figured that you were going to basically say the heck with it is on not only politics, but knowing you and, you stuck to the guns and said, no, this has to be reset. Otherwise, we'll never have free and fair local elections, and it has to be addressed. How long do you think it's going to be before you could get to the appellate court? Is it going to be anytime this year or maybe in the next year or before the 2024 elections?
We'll be there this year. The question will just be how much more delay the other side can cause. That's their game plan. I mean, anyone else, any other system, like where they had the issue in DuPage, they had the same issue. What did they do? They had a full recount. They said, okay, you got to pay X amount of money, and then we're going to have a full recount. And they had a full recount, but not here, not in Cook County. What they said to me was at first they go, oh, he needs $650,000 to have a recount. It's going to take us 3 months and 40 employees. And I'm like, what? What do you mean? It's all electronic. You got the ballots, you put them through the machine. But no, they come up with this figure of $650,000 it's going to cost me, which of course is outrageous and insane because I shouldn't bear the cost to begin with, because the whole thing is to show that we have fair and impartial elections. But that's not what they did. They did just the opposite. They want to close those doors. They want to show in the future that opponents, if you lose in this place, in our house, in their house, you're done. You could try to sue, you could try to do whatever, but you're not going anywhere because we're just going to prevent you from getting the discovery you need. We're not going to allow a recount, and we're just going to push you around until you get tired and go away.
What is the best case scenario out of the appellate court? If you do go to it, and I know some of these things are still in the process, maybe you can't talk about certain issues, but what would be, if you can talk about it, the best case scenario out of the appellate court for you?
Well, two things. One, the appellate court should find that the judge improperly did not allow our substitution of judges. We should get a new forum. We should get a fair judge out of Cook County. Two, they can grant a full recount. Or three, they could say, you know what? You're right. We're going to allow you to amend your complaint. Those vote by mail ballot envelopes are deficient. When we take those vote by mail envelopes out, you win the race. You won. This is over. Take my opponent out and seat me in. That's what they could do, because that's what the evidence showed. That's what the deficiency shows.
If, let's say, they do say that, unless, and we don't know how the court is going to rule it. Let's say they say that, and they say first that the judge was wrong for not allowing you. You go through the process, still shows at the end that actually you win, given the vote count. What happens? What happens is the appellate court rules that? Does the other side now have a right to take it up to the Supreme Court of Illinois, or what is the process from there?
Yes, if the appellate court did rule that, they could appeal to the Supreme Court.
And their appeal to Supreme Court thinking in advance, what would that be? Would it be that the appellate court decision is wrong, going back and saying that the original judge was correct, or is it something different?
That's exactly right. That's what they would have to say. They would say that the original judge was right when he denied their motion for a substitution of judges. The original judge was right when he denied their motion to amend their complaint. The original judge was right when they allowed them to redact deficient vote by mail envelopes to commit a fraud.
So in this particular case, I guess the best case scenario would be the appellate court votes on your behalf or rules on your behalf, and then even if it goes up to the Supreme Court, they actually say we agree with the appellate court. What would be, is this uncharted waters? Has that happened in Illinois before that you know of? What would be that case if it goes through and the appellate says, we agree with Frank, and then Supreme Court says we agree with the appellate? What happens?
Completely uncharted waters, you're right. This case is the farthest an election case has ever gone in Cook County or Illinois, is my understanding. And what would happen is, if the appellate court rules in my favor, they would have to appeal to the Supreme Court. Question number one is, would the Supreme Court even hear it? I don't think the Supreme Court would even hear it, because they know that the rulings are so simple. You know, could a judge, an associate judge, fairly oversee a case where the party is technically a full circuit judge, the one that keeps him on the bench? That's the first question. Second question is, should a party be allowed to amend when you got to remember, this is the first time we got this discovery. We never were allowed to have access to these vote by mail ballot envelopes to be able to categorize them and catalog them and show their deficiencies. This was the first time. And the only reason we got them is because it was their motion to dismiss. They never gave them to us in discovery. So what in the world could if the appellate court realizes that, of course, we have a right to amend, we were entitled to that discovery in the first place. How are we denied that discovery in the first place, right? So we're denied the discovery. Now we have it. Now we proved our case. It should be over. There should be no more questions.
Let me ask you, let's go back and look at the federal court case that you filed. Would it be much better if time had allotted for you to go through the entire process of the state case and then go to the federal court, or did you have no choice that you have to both go to federal and also state at the same time?
We really had no choice. We have to go through state court. We had to do the discovery recount through state court. And the issues on federal court are a little different. They're constitutional issues. They're different than the ones in state court. And there's a theory that the state court can give me the actual seat. They could seat me in that judicial position. The federal court cannot, but the federal court can award damages.
When you talk about damages, would this be financial damages for everything that you've incurred as far as the fees and everything you had to pay out of pocket just to get to where you are today with this lawsuit? Absolutely. My legal fees are very, very expensive. We've been litigating for it'll be 2 years. And it's in the hundreds of thousands of dollars that I have spent pursuing this legal matter. How much of the money that was given to your campaign could be used in this case for legal fees? Were you able to go, if you had any money in the coffers, to use that for these processes? No, we spent the money that we had for the fund that we had raised for the election. There was no fundraiser for this process, this appeal process. Have you been able to raise any money at all, any donations to at least help you with the case you're going through, or has it just been out of pocket, whatever you're earning from your living is basically being used to try to litigate against the state of Illinois that can bring taxpayer money to give to those institutions that are trying to counter you in this case?
Well, so far it's been out of pocket. I have talked to my lawyers and some other people and the party, Republican Party, and they have assured me that they are going to try to organize and raise funds for this next set of litigation, for this next appeal process.
Okay, but the Illinois GOP really hasn't gone into their coffers, whatever money, if they had any, and tried to use any of it to support your process?
No, not to date, which we had discussed, because this case, we caught him. This case shows that we caught him. And now they don't just do it in my race. I mean, come on, you got to be naive to think it only happened here. So we caught them. We saw how they manipulate the vote by mail voting. And now if they don't pursue it, or no one pursues it, they're just going to keep getting away with it. I mean, there's no incentive for them to stop.
In this particular case, could it have been that a district attorney, if they were even privileged to see some of the open source information, like the program we have today and others, that they could have at least said, you know what, I'm not going to wait for a federal lawsuit to go through. There's plenty here for me to look into what's happening in Cook County. I don't know. I know you can't talk on their behalf legally, but would they have been able to intervene at the federal level without even having you have to go through the process of filing a lawsuit?
Well, at the federal level, I know there is investigations. I know that they had been investigating Madigan for years and years and years. We believe that they may have information regarding my case and other cases. How they pursue it or what they're going to do with it, I really don't have any idea. As far as the state goes, the county, they're the same bunch. They're all together. So no, they're not going to do a thing. They won't investigate. They won't prosecute. They won't do anything.
If this goes through, let's say, and it's hopefully it goes through and you win your case, and the federal courts come back and actually agree with the state appellate that there should be financial burden should be alleviated off of what you had to deal with. Do you have the right then to be able to personally sue your opponent for all the damages that you had to incur? Is that allowed under federal law?
I'm not aware of that, because we can't show that those actions were done by her personally. So we physically don't know who physically did it. We would like to. We tried to get the video surveillance. There's video surveillance at the election, at the poll, where they counting site in Cicero. They won't give it to us. Why wouldn't they give it to us? Because we were in disbelief, because what happened was they had all these envelopes. They had all these ballots, right? And each day it goes down and down and down and down and down. So they get 134 in the last day. Then they got none. They got none. They got none left. They tell our poll watcher, okay, you can go. We're not counting anymore. Everything's done. And then 2 days later, they find 6,000 more ballots. How do you explain that? I mean, you cannot explain it. You cannot explain. Now, I'll tell you what, there was video surveillance. But why were we deprived of that video surveillance? I could tell you on certain days, they closed the whole counting area, the whole Cermak location, and said, everybody go home. We're going to have COVID cleaning. And everyone's like, what? COVID cleaning? Why would you have COVID cleaning in the middle of the day? I mean, why wouldn't you do that at night when they're done? Why would you do it in the middle of the day? But they did. There were several issues like that had occurred that didn't make any sense. So no, could I sue her personally? No, I can't prove that she actually did the act that was done.
Well, unfortunately, the issue becomes that as long as you got individuals who are willing to be in position of power for whoever they work for, and sometimes they're more of a slave for those individuals than they there or anything else. Until they start feeling the financial squeeze in cases from the federal to local level, I think they will continue to have these issues. And then eventually, I think it would be proper, maybe the legislator can take a look, especially with the new change that will take place with Madigan stepping down, and hopefully a change at the Illinois legislator to possibly give an opportunity for suits against individuals who might participate in corruption at whatever level. That would really clean up most things, because I know when it's been done in other states and especially other nations overseas, they tend to sell each other out right away because they all know they're part of the process, and they're worried that they might end up being the chewing gum that gets spit out once the flavor of the day is done. Frank, I know that initially me and you got involved because, as soon as the election was over, I was, for those who did not know, I ran in the 9th Congressional District against the minority whip here. And we received, with 43,000 in the coffers, 107,818 votes. I remember that when I was sitting at a meeting with our Legion of St. Michael police officers, we saw on the phone how the vote count was initially high for me, and then the vote count drops and then goes back up a little bit, comes back down again. And you have all these screen captures, and you're like, this is ridiculous. If they're giving the information out, it should be either numbers are going up and that's it, or they're not being reported, they stay as is. So, I did reach out to an opponent, after the election, told them, good luck if they need any help. And then 4 days later, we started getting all the information as to what was happening, the same issues you had to deal with the shutting down. They were, looking at COVID cleaning, and then, individuals had called whistleblowers to the Federal Bureau of Investigation, and then suddenly 2 hours later, those cleanings take place, which really ticks off the system as to somebody must have called them, told them, hey, they're about to come down there and take a look at your work, so make sure the facility is closed. It is unfortunate, but it's the reality of what we have to do through the system. And I myself had almost 50,000 there. I just don't have the money to be able to fight it, to be able to see where that 50,000 would have been possibly flipped. Now, I know that I wouldn't have won the election because the vote count for her was still going to be higher than usual. It would have taken some major, circumstances to show to any federal judge that, look, it was close enough that there should have been a recount of most of the votes to begin with anyway. But I do know that at least it would have given us an opportunity to show that, look, you have a person who ran with $43,000 in the coffers, and you're looking at north of 150,000 possible votes. That means people in Cook County don't want these individuals to be in charge. They don't like them. They're leaving their dead parents in cemeteries here and leaving in droves to go to other states, which is a shame. Where do we go from here, Frank, as far as, we got elections coming up in 2022. A lot of people might be listening to the program and say, well, why do I even vote if that's the case? Where do we go from here? I know that you're pushing your case, and we're going to hopefully support you to try to get to that one. What advice can you give our viewers when it comes to this current election that is coming up? And what are some of the things they should look for, and why they should participate?
We need election integrity. Our whole country depends on it. So what you really need is to look at all the issues that you have in elections and say, how could you not require an ID to vote? It just doesn't make sense. I can't go into a liquor store or somewhere to buy liquor without showing my ID. I can't go anywhere. You have to have an ID, but you're going to vote, one of the most important things in our country, and we're going to say that you can't ask for an ID? Why? It doesn't make sense. And you have to have these people vote in person. It's so important to vote in person because all the fraud, I believe, is committed with this vote by mail. That's where the other side, or any side, could take advantage of the system. There was that issue in Philadelphia where the one, what was he? A rep. He was a congressman, and the congressman admitted he pled to election fraud. He pled to fraudulently stuffing ballot boxes, specific Democratic candidates in 2014, 15, 16, 17, and 18 for Pennsylvania elections. I mean, people act like it doesn't happen. They don't realize it. That's not even on the news. It didn't make the news. And this happened back in August of this year. This guy pled guilty in federal court. We don't hear about it. Nobody knows about it. There is election fraud. And how do you prevent it? Well, first of all, you have some general simple rules. You vote in person, you use an ID, period. Not a big deal. That's not asking too much. And you just can't you got to avoid just vote by mail just because it's easier for a fraud to be committed. And that's the problem. And even then, when they do vote by mail, they don't follow the rules. Like if they get a vote by mail ballot envelope and it's not signed, it's no good. It's not supposed to be counted. If the residency requirements aren't met, it's not supposed to be counted. But no, they just count everything. So that's the problem. People have to be interested and see what's going on in Illinois. People have to realize why people are leaving in groves. Why are they leaving Illinois? Are they tired of the way that this state is being run? Or are they trying to make a change? So people that are trying to make a change and that could see the need for new leadership, for fair and ethical and integrity in our elections. And I think that's what we need.
Yeah, that's what we need. Unfortunately, not everybody's been raised in a family that says, God, country is important, and you need to make sure that, you take care of what we already have as institutions and make sure that they're, good institutions that people have faith in, rather than worry about your own personal, job position or money that you're going to be receiving while you're in that position. But, you got some people who only care mostly about themselves. You've shown that you don't, because of the fact that you've fought this and put money out of pocket to fix it. Well, we're going to try to help you out as much as possible, Frank, on this process. I do know that for our viewers, if they take a look at the QR code here, it will take them to DiFranco Associates, say a little bit more about who you are, and then hopefully we could have you back. And I'm hoping that the Republican Party can put something together to be able to at least alleviate the pressures that you've been dealing with when it comes to the financial burdens that you have to deal with. For our audiences, I do want to let them know too that this year we've been raising money for United Assyrian Appeal to support the Christians of Northern Iraq and also South Sudan mission because of what is happening with the Christians of South Sudan, especially with most of them being in the Kenya refugee camps with the food famine that is taking place. Please help if you like the programmings that we have. And also at the same time, I want to thank Fred and Sim Production for giving us the opportunity to bring people like Frank here. Frank, I'm going to give you the last word before we go to a video that even shows about how election fraud could take place with machine frauds in 2018. Obviously, we don't listen well because when I walked into the primary vote this year, the same machines that they had talked about in 2018 are still sitting in Skokie, Illinois. But I'll give you the last word.
I just want to say thanks. I greatly appreciate you giving me the time and the opportunity to speak on this issue, and I want to thank you for your service.
No, thank you very much, buddy. It's guys like you that allow me to say I'm glad that I was out there fighting, because like I said in my opening monologue, it is those values that we have to uphold in institutions, and I know you're doing it by being out there in the fight to try to make sure that this whole thing is reset. God bless you, and we'll keep you in our prayers, and we'll bring you back again. With that said, there's new paradigms.
Let's say you run an authoritarian government and you want to cause chaos in a democratic country. What's an easy target? How about the voting process? Some experts say it may not be so hard to do it in this democracy, because many of the states of these United States still use outdated, easy-to-hack voting machines.
In in every single case where a U.S. voting machine has been analyzed by competent security researchers, they have found vulnerabilities that would let someone inject malicious software and change election data. Every single case.
That's Professor J. Alex Halderman from the University of Michigan. He's one of the world's leading specialists in voting systems. He's helped Congress draft legislation on how to beef up election security, especially after U.S. intelligence agencies found widespread hacking attempts by Russia in 2016.
I know America's voting machines are vulnerable because my colleagues and I have hacked them repeatedly as part of a decade of research studying the technology that operates elections and learning how to make it stronger.
Halderman has shown how U.S. voting systems will be vulnerable in 2020 elections. He says up to 18 states still plan to use voting machines like this one, the AccuVote TSX touchscreen, or other versions like it.
I brought one here with me today, in fact, and we're going to conduct an election. This machine that I brought with me, I bought this one on eBay. It was used until very recently in Ohio.
He says malicious software can be added when basic operating data is entered for each machine.
And the way that works is election officials prepare that on a PC somewhere and copy it to the machines using removable memory cards like this. Election officials are going to put it in the machine like this before the election. But what our election officials don't know is that I, the attacker, have already infected that memory card with malicious software. Here are our candidates. George Washington or Benedict Arnold. Okay, so we have one vote here for George Washington. So we have 3 votes for George Washington. Oh, a narrow victory for Benedict Arnold. 1 vote for George, 2 votes for Ben, because the malware I inserted on the memory card has stolen the election.
In the United States, every single state independently controls how it conducts elections, even for federal office. Some outsource the programming of voting machine data cards to private vendors. These firms may have their own issues.
Well, here's a vendor that did the election programming for a large fraction of my state in 2016. Here are lots of nice high-resolution photographs of their warehouse in case you want to break in. So if I wanted to break into this company, let's say I was the attacker, I'd probably start by forging an email from, let's say, Larry, the president here, to Sue, his administrative assistant, asking her to urgently open an attachment.
That malware could now spread to memory cards via PCs throughout the firm's network. But if the machines aren't actually online when you vote, there's no way to hack them, right?
This is something that you hear all the time in the U.S. from election officials. Unfortunately, it's not actually true. Those election management system workstations sometimes are connected to the internet, or the data that's programmed into them passes through an internet-connected system. So we're just 1 or 2 hops away from an online attacker.
A Senate Intelligence Committee report in 2019 concluded that Russian operatives attempted to hack into voting systems in all 50 states in 2016.
I think we need to worry very much in 2020 about not only Russia, but Iran, China, North Korea, and other countries that have sophisticated cybersecurity offensive capabilities.
The U.S. Congress was concerned enough to approve $380 million in emergency grants for states to improve their systems in 2018.
But that money came with no security requirements, believe it or not. States could use it for anything they wanted, including just buying more I voted stickers.
Halderman says just a statistical sample audit of scanned paper ballots could identify anomalies in electronic voting. So how many states will do this kind of risk-limiting audit in 2020?
It's probably going to be fewer than half will require any kind of review of the paper record.
The U.S. Senate has yet to take a vote on another bill to provide even more money to states for improving voting systems with a requirement for a paper trail and audits. Some senators argue that the federal government shouldn't tell individual states how to run their elections. But this isn't just about the United States. Halderman says that all democratic elections are vulnerable in some way.
This is a pattern that's being repeated again and again in political conflicts across the world. It's only going to get worse.